And so my talk for this week is the Paris bombings and your spiritual practice. And so as always, I have a couple of quotes to begin with here. An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. That's Gandhi. And then he who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. And that's Confucius. So there's nothing that can make this event okay or good. I mean, it's the same way with disease like cancer. It's not that cancer can ever be good or okay. These events are horrific, and yet they give us an opportunity to either believe or not in our spiritual practice. We're mad. We want to do something, and we don't know what. These people are terrorists, have caused pain, a lot of pain. And then there's this thing called spiritual truth. For those of us who have walked this path, that truth might be nagging at you. Maybe in the back of your mind, doing its best to break through to full consciousness. I know you know what I'm saying here. Some of us use spiritual truth like a piece of clothing you wear once in a while, but not all the time. Like I've heard people say, I go to my job and then I do my spiritual work. As if there's a separation, but spiritual truth exists whether we are using it or not. And because of the way spiritual truth works, it's impacting our lives, whether we are consciously applying it or not. So what is this spiritual truth? What we embody manifests. As an individual, as a race consciousness, this principle is happening whether we like it or not. What we embody manifests. It's not good. It's not bad. It's simply what is. What we embody manifests. So what do I mean by that? Out of the totality of civilization's thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and actions, that's what shows up in the physical world. Out of the totality of an individual's thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and actions, that's what shows up in that person's life. Each of us is creator of our lives from the totality of what we've embodied in that moment. And in that moment, when what we embody changes, so does what shows up. This is true for the individual, and it is also true for our civilization. So we look into the mirror of civilization and race consciousness, and what do we see? Well, we still see that we embody hatred, violence, misunderstanding, and fear. But we look in the mirror a little deeper, and what do we see? There's love, there's kindness, there's caring for our fellow humanity, empathy, compassion. These are part of the race consciousness of our civilization as well. And in these moments of horrific events, it's easy to see one side of the mirror but not the other, which leads to our second spiritual truth. What we focus on, we give power to. And when we give power to something, it grows. So anger and upset exist. And I fully appreciate that. That we have that experience of anger and upset. But it is also, and it's appropriate when horrific events like this happen. But it is also appropriate to begin our spiritual practice and use this as an opportunity to build our spiritual muscles. Because we have it within us to tip the tide. Each of us has the same force that Gandhi used to create critical mass for a peaceful independence of India. Each of us can stand for what's just and right within our own being and then through our actions in the world. This leads to our third spiritual truth. Only now exists. The past is gone. The future is yet to be. So what will you do now? I recommend being true to yourself. Being your highest self. To bring your best, because your best is unique to you. No one else can bring your best into life. Only you can do that. So you can't sit by and watch somebody else bring their best while you stay angry and upset at what has happened here. If you want to see change in the world, you must bring your best. So dive into your spiritual practice. Remember that there is only love and fear, and that every second you are adding to the race consciousness of one or the other. Every second you are adding to the race consciousness of either love or fear. The terrorists in Paris added a lot of fear. It's up to you through spiritual practice not to do the same. I have read quite a few true stories of parents who have forgiven the killers of their children. I am in awe of that and use that as the basis for my own spiritual practice. So do not let these terrorists place terror in your hearts. Dive into your spiritual practice and remember what must always be true, that we are powerful, creative, spiritual beings, and our lives work magnificently, even in the face of this. This must be true. It's always true. Don't wear it like a piece of clothing. Breathe it like during these times and live it. Because by you living it in your own unique way, you feed the consciousness into the race consciousness that created these terrorists in the first place. And we move a little closer to that critical mass that changes the race consciousness to embodying less terror, thereby creating less terrorism. So we, by embodying our spiritual practice, actually take on the peace that is required in the world today. It is up to us to know spiritual truth and to stand by it, especially during these times, because this is when our stance is needed the most. This is when love, compassion, empathy, caring, and giving are needed the most. When we stand in truth, what others call miracles, for us is simply the outcome of our spiritual practice. And that's what we want here. The miracle of peace, love, and acceptance throughout the world. When Martin Luther King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, there was no physical evidence that might lead us to believe we would have an African American president someday. His words are a guiding light even today. He says, with this faith, we will be able to hew out the mountain of despair and a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, pray together, to struggle together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. The seed of possibility planted that day grew into the logical outcome of today. You don't have to see it to believe it. You need to believe it so you can see it. Mahatma Gandhi. So the seeds, I'm not up to that quote yet. So the seeds you plant, given the opportunity presented by these horrific, so what seeds will you plant, given the opportunity presented by these horrific events? What will you hold in your consciousness today that will lead to the life we create as a civilization tomorrow? Mahatma Gandhi tells us, be the change you wish to see in the world, so that we may all be free to experience the exaltation of Dr. King's words. When this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village, from every hamlet, from every state, from every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, free at last. Thank you. I love you.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God.